Welcome to episode 127 of 10 Minute Record Reviews. This time I'm going to talk about Ray Charles' classic album from 1962, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music. And what I have here is the first Canadian pressing. This is Ray's crossover album, and speaking bluntly, this is the album which got a lot of white people into Ray Charles. Ostensibly, it's full of country classics, and certainly almost all the songs on here are country standards. But to my ears, and certainly I think to contemporary ears, they're barely recognizable as country songs the way that they are arranged and produced. Throughout the 1950s, which was still a heavily segregated time in the United States, Charles made all kinds of impact on the R&B charts, but very little on the white-dominated so-called pop charts. It actually took Ray until 1959 to get a hit in the pop charts, and he achieved that with What Did I Say, which made it to number 6. But if his impact in the pop charts was hit and miss, as an R&B star by this point, he was massive. He was filling huge venues, not just typically black-dominated venues like the Apollo Theater, but also Carnegie Hall. He played Newport Jazz. So he was becoming a big star, which the white-dominated part of the industry could no longer afford to ignore. His contract with Atlantic ends in 1959, and that year he signs with ABC Paramount for pretty big money, and he was able to dictate a lot of artistic control into the terms of his contract. He was also one of those artists who around this time began to capitalize on, or maybe actually contributed to, the popularity of LPs, and he had a number of very well-selling long players. This includes The Genius of Ray Charles, his last album for Atlantic, which was basically a big band outing, and also The Genius Hits the Road, which is an album where he does a whole bunch of place name checking songs. Ray at this time was also increasingly interested in crossing genres, and he had recorded the Hank Snow song, Movin' On, which had been a big hit. His recording output from 1959 to 1961 had been very, very successful. Not just the albums I mentioned, but also the positive experience of the Hank Snow cover. He'd won 5 Grammys in this period, and so when he went to his label to say that he wanted to record an album of country and western songs, they didn't like it, but there wasn't much they could do about it. His peers amongst black musicians also had problems with this choice because, of course, this was the high point, or one of the many high points of the civil rights movement, and country and western music was, if nothing else, completely associated with white Southerners. Charles, however, was a real iconoclast in this issue, as he was pretty much throughout his career, and the point that he wanted to make, that he felt very strongly about, was that essentially that country and blues music are bound by the fact that they tell the stories of ordinary people in very plain and honest ways, unlike pop music, which is much more obscure in its treatment of real-life issues. In his words, they were the same goddamn thing exactly. Listening to this album today, this fuss seems kind of misplaced because these may be country songs, but they are not country arrangements. You've got substantial orchestral and vocal accompaniment. This music here on this record is not for the bars and honky-tonks of the white South. This is music which is heavily produced and rendered palatable and accessible to the white middle-class living rooms of the day. This is the adult contemporary music of its day. It's a huge seller. It's a #1 pop album. 4 singles off this album charted. This album is often praised too for its cultural influence because not only does it introduce a major black star to a large white audience, it also greatly increases the appeal of country music, which up until that point was still largely restricted to Southern culture. Having persuaded his label to make this record, Charles didn't actually have a big long list of songs he actually wanted to play. So he got hold of Sid Feller, his key A&R guy with ABC Paramount, and asked Feller to assemble a catalog of country and western standards that Ray could consider recording on this record. Feller does this research and eventually sends him no less than 150 songs on tape for Ray to review. Having had a lot of success with his big band records in the past couple of years, Charles wanted to take a similar approach. He didn't just want to slavishly copy the country arrangements, he actually wanted to do new arrangements, so he brought in 3 different big band arrangers, Gerald Wilson, Gil Fuller, and Marty Paich. The producer is listed as Sid Feller, but it's pretty clear that Charles had probably the greatest influence in the sound of the whole record. It's his concept, it's his band, and it's his influence on the arrangements down to some of the finer details. If there's anything it sounds like to me, it's not so much the Ray Charles of the Atlantic years in R&B, and it's not like country music either. It is more like Sinatra, if anything, and it's that same combination of a big, slick band playing well, beautifully produced, with a powerful male vocal, but also a male vocal showing a lot of vulnerability and sensitivity. And that was always Sinatra's special sauce, and this is Charles's special sauce here as well. That contrast between the super competent, big, bold sound of the big band, but also the vulnerability of the singer. So ultimately, I don't really know how you classify this music. Is it country? It doesn't really sound like country to me. It's not R&B. I think what you can say is just kind of like Sinatra, this is American music. It's very American, American of the time, very emblematic of the particular musical zeitgeist. It was huge in the day. How does it sound now? Side 1 kicks off with Bye Bye Love, which of course the Everlys made famous. This is a song which actually I think is more of a rock and roll song than anything else, not so much a country song. This is the sole appearance of the Raylettes in this record, which is such a shame because they were such an intrinsic part of his sound in the late 50s and early 1960s, and they're front and center here, thankfully, with their beautiful harmonies. That's followed by one of the biggest hits off this record, You Don't Know Me, which was an Eddie Arnold song. As a piece of songwriting, this is great. It's about unrequited love, about somebody being basically put in the friend zone. It's got a wonderful middle eight, which they repeat twice. What you begin to feel, however, here is that there is this kind of, well, I'm just going to say it's a Lawrence Welkiness to the feel of the song and ultimately to the feel of this record, which detracts, for me, from the quality of Charles's singing performance, which is excellent, almost without reservation, all the way through the record. And sadly, that middle eight, which Ray pulls off so well the first time, is done the second time, not by the Raylettes, who are now, I guess, banished to the sidelines, but by the whole kind of bow tie and hairspray crowd, which I just can't really get past listening to this record. For me, it ruins the song, and it really has a major impact on the overall sound of the album. Half as much is notable, amongst other reasons, for having a tenor sax solo by Don Wilkerson, who also recorded as a leader for Blue Note. Charles's singing is amazing. It's so clear, too. He enunciates so brilliantly, and the production is done in such a way, as is so often the case in country music, and here is where I think there is a real debt to country, to allow the story to be clearly told. And on we go. This album basically alternates upbeat songs with ballads, and the next song is I Love You So Much It Hurts, a ballad. Ray's good, too many strings for me, arrangement is over the top. Just a Little Lovin' follows, and that's got a sax solo by Dave Fathead Newman, which is kind of an interesting footnote. His sax, however, is a lot thinner sounding than Wilkerson's, and it's kind of drowned in the orchestral arrangement. The final song on side 1 is Born to Lose, another ballad, and pretty much all that I've said about side 1 applies to this song as well. Side 2 starts with Worried Mind, which to my ears is a bit of a highlight. It's really nice to hear Ray stepping out on piano here too. It Makes No Difference follows. This is a bit of a break from all the heavy orchestration until, anyway, about 3/4 of the way through the song. Unfortunately, they can't help themselves and the lushness creeps back in for the final 30 seconds or so. You Win Again is a great Hank Williams song with a great Ray performance, totally drowned in Hollywood production, just ruined, frankly. That's followed by Careless Love, which is the only Ray Charles original song on the whole record. And to me, this sounds like Ray is a little more liberated here, perhaps inevitably as one would be on one's own tune. You're not interpreting, you're simply creating and expressing your own emotions. Second last song on the album is the #1 smash, I Can't Stop Loving You. You know, all I can say is the Beatles needed to arrive when they did, because if this is the kind of song which is making it to #1 in 1962, America was in a bad way. It's undeniably a great song. Ray's singing is undeniably great singing, but I can't escape the feeling that I'm being slow roasted on the set of a Slim Whitman late-night TV infomercial. The final song is another Hank Williams classic, Hey Good Looking, which has a great solo by Ray. Ditto all the previous comments about production, but this is a strong way to end the record. Well, there's no denying that Ray is at the peak of his powers here. The quality of his performance in and of itself is fantastic, but he has to take some responsibility for the artistic choices made in this record because he, as I mentioned, really had his hands on the production ideas, the arranging ideas, and the overall feel and sound and concept. On a technical basis, this album is beautifully recorded and executed, but the experience of listening to it is syrupy and just a little bit soul-destroying because here's a guy who had risen as far as he had by playing some of the greatest R&B music that was ever recorded, and in more recent years by forging this incredible musical relationship with his backup singers, the Raylettes. But despite all of that, what you get here is Ray, on the one hand, abandoning all of that spontaneity and lust within R&B, but at the same time also producing a whole bunch of watered-down country songs with this syrupy arrangement, and in the process of doing so, effectively neutering both of those two great traditions of American music. So I guess you can put me in the camp of the revisionists in this album. For me, Ray Charles's greatest work was done in his years with Atlantic from between 53 and 59. This is a genius drowned in white middle-class schmaltz, and it's a 3 out of 5.